I remember hearing it about, you know, Junior Seau shooting himself in the heart and donating his brain, and it's like, wow, you know, is that a period in time where it's like this guy has done that, and for us, is that a message, you know? I remember seeing that, I was like, is that a message? And I think after that in Australia, definitely we were just like, wow, this is actually a thing. I remember it. And you were like incredibly close with him. You know, what was that like?
Yeah, I played with Junior for 2 years in the late 90s and actually retired as a Charger, which was the team that we were on. And work hard, play hard.
Yeah.
His restaurant was where we went after games, and he and I weren't particularly personally close while we played, but we were, you know, team close and teammates. And after we got done retiring, I had gotten sober, and we had some mutual friends that had known that, you know, 6-7 years after I retired that I had stayed sober, and they were like, man, I reach out to Junior, he's not doing so well. So I did, and he called everybody, buddy, what's up, buddy? I said, hey man, let's go to lunch. And we did, and we started talking, and I think at that time he was in it, he was feeling it, and he had some questions about what I was doing. I was like, man, I know how hard it is to walk into a room where you've got these ideas about what an alcoholic or drug addict looks like. A dude, you know, drinking out of a brown paper sack, living underneath a park bench. I said, but it's not that. And I went on to tell him my story and what it was, and bought him a book and took him to a meeting. And at that first meeting, he said, you know, I'm Junior. Now you got to understand, Koby, like he went to high school in San Diego. He went to college 100 miles up the road and then played an entire Hall of Fame career in the city of San Diego. Like there was not a person within 100 square miles that didn't know who Junior Seau was. And he walked into somebody's garage and on a Tuesday night and announced that, you know, he was a drug addict, alcoholic, sexaholic, gambleaholic, and started listing all of these negative coping strategies. And in our world, you're like, man, there's hope. Like if he can be that honest in an area, in a room where everybody knew who he was, there's light at the end of that tunnel. But then boom, he went dark on me, wouldn't return my text. And a couple weeks later, fell asleep at the wheel, and man, I reached out to him a couple times in the interim, and I'll never forget being at the gym with my wife and getting a phone call from a mutual friend of Junior's and I, and said, did you hear what happened to Junior? And I started crying.
You knew?
I knew.
Yeah.
I knew. Falling asleep at the wheel, driving off the highway, that was the first attempt, and it didn't work. So Junior, unfortunately, was pretty resilient and resolved and found a way that did in a permanent way. And to hear his story and to know how much guilt and shame that he felt about the role that he played with his wife and within his family, not being there for his kids, like excruciating wailing, talking about how he felt like a failure as a father, just carrying all that. And in the Polynesian culture, he felt like the king of the village, and the village was Southern California, and would constantly get phone calls from family members that would want him to sponsor the 16-year-old party for this and that, and pay for the prom and the this and that. And he had had some financial trouble and was taken advantage of with a lot of people and lost a ton of money, and the restaurant shut down, and he had marriage problems, financial problems, family problems, problems that seemingly a lot of people go through. But being posthumously diagnosed with CTE, secondary to multiple concussions, it became harder for him to process that. So what were significant things felt like insurmountable things. And he had an inability at the end of the day to deal with life on life's terms. Playing with broken bones, having the toughness to do that, but not having the resilience to deal with life on life's terms. Man, that's a dichotomy that is hard to reconcile.